Is back. So what we've been doing for the last about 2 or 3 weeks, I think, 3 weeks I guess, is we're focused on person on bottom, defensive open guard, and then we're ultimately leading this into a daily helo guard block. So with the open guard, we started off with long distance, then we started with mid-range, and then actually on Monday, we started with shorter range where my shoulders are trying to get to my partner's hips. So long range is generally person on top can touch your partner's ankles or feet, or his ankles or feet can reach my torso. Mid-range is a little bit more like his knees can reach my torso, and then short range is hips to torso. And that's just kind of like an easy, rough, general way to break it down. On Monday, we did shoulders to torso, how to frame on your partner's collarbone, make distance, and then pummel your outside leg back in, right? So the goal that we're working for is, because we're doing daily helo guard soon, we're working on ways to not get our guards past and then work from different ranges to get back to the right range for daily helo guard. So if we're doing shoulders to hip passing, we already worked on that Monday. Framing in the collarbone, making enough space between the shoulders and the hip to pummel your top leg back in. Once we get a little further and we're doing shoulder to shoulder, things change a little bit, because now it's really hard for him to frame on my neck hard enough to make enough space to get his legs back in to my torso. So what we're gonna work on first is an off balance where Kurt's on top. And let's say we're in half guard. And this is more of a worst case scenario here. He's got a strong cross face on my neck. And then from here, the reason this is a problem is because it keeps my head locked in place. And if his knee is tucked into my hip, I should have a hard time elbow escaping. He can also put a lot of weight into my neck, which really sucks. So the off balance that we're gonna do from here is, the first one is, this arm is gonna go across the neck with my hand on the trap, and this hand is gonna go across his belly and grab the top of my own thigh on this side. From here, if Kurt's putting weight on me, I'm turning my chin, pulling my knees up to my chest, and off balancing upwards. So if you can see, without Kurt on top of me, I'm going here. I'm getting smashed, like this, framing on the neck, here, and connecting to the top of my thigh, and then when I pull everything up north, it should off balance my partner up in this direction. The reason I'm doing all three of these things together is because if Kurt's on top of me, and I just try to use only my legs, I make my life worse because I'm pulling him into my neck. If I just do this, and my legs, he moves his head. If I frame on my knee, I can use 3 different points of contact on him to off balance upwards. And then from here, I can make the distance that I want to pummel my legs back in. Does that make sense? Let's try this out and I'll help you with the details. Part 3, right? So the major problem from this position, there's a bunch of problems. Problem number 1 is that since he has control of my upper body and he's pinning my shoulders to the mat, I have to worry about him either passing the side control or passing to the mount. So if he were to pass to the mount, there's not a lot that I can do if you go back, besides push on his knee to stop him. And if I push on his knee, it allows him to keep an easy underhook, or if you drive your knee over. Here, my hand is cold enough where I can freeze his knee, but eventually it'll fly out. So he can grab my wrist with his break hand and loop over for a Kimura grip here, which is a problem. So if anybody trains with TJ, this is guaranteed to happen. If we go back, if I go here and he tries to go to the mount, I have a barrier that makes it hard for him to slide his knee over to the mount. I can also use this frame to shift his hips away. Now the problem is, this is still attached to my neck. So if you were to try to go to the mount and shoulder pressure on my neck, you can't really mount very easily here, but at the same time, I'm still getting squished on my neck, and I would have to worry about him going to side control. So if you go to side control, we'll slide your knee. There you go. So if we go back, all the pieces working together, he puts pressure on my neck, I'm framing here, and so when I pull my knees up, I don't have to worry about the mount. If you try to go to the mount, it's very difficult for him to do that. If he tries to go to side control, at this point, I have all the frames that I need to get my legs back in, or kick through if you're an underhook half guard player. That makes sense? So try a couple more times, and then we'll work on from there. Pretty much every type of half guard that you're gonna do with your feet, you either have to keep your legs crossed the entire time, or if you have to open them, you always want to keep like a chopstick kind of pressure. And the reason is because if he only has one leg on me, there's really no control to stop me from stepping out. So if you were to do this whole move and his legs open up, and you off balance me, pretty easy to step out. You could keep my ankles crossed, or keep some kind of chopstick pressure, like pressing, Yep. It's really hard for me to step out in any kind of meaningful way. That makes sense? Cool. Let's give it a shot. Let's say Kurt's on top, and he's got this again, and he's got his underhook. So there's another situation where if I'm here and I can't get underneath his neck, there's two reasons why I wouldn't be able to. One, he keeps his head really, really tight to my head, and there's not enough space. Or two, in trying to dig under his neck, I feel like I'm going to give him a better head position. So for example, if I were to go here, he drops his head, he passes, he had run towards me, right? If I go underneath, you'll occasionally feel like you're going to get wrist locked with your fingers digging under the neck here. So if there's a situation where you feel like you can't get your arm across the neck to frame like this, then a second option that you can do that's a little bit riskier but a lot more commonly seen is sliding your hips out to an angle and then getting a butterfly hook inside of the thigh. And when I'm doing this, so here, if Kurt's putting pressure, here, my elbow is framing across the hip. Here, I'm keeping the chopstick pressure that we were talking about. What I mean by chopstick pressure is anytime I have to uncross my ankles, I'm always putting pressure on one side of the leg and pressure on the other side of the leg. So there's always squeezing. If I open the chopsticks, the sushi falls down. So if I keep the chopsticks closed the entire time and make small movements where if Kurt tries to step out at any point, I should be able to hold on to the leg. So that's what I mean by chopstick pressure. It's always counter pressure on both sides of the leg to control it if your partner is trying to step out. So if you start stepping out, everything is always pressure on both sides of the leg. So from here, to make space, I'm scooting my hips out. Here, keeping my knee attached to my partner, leg slides up, inserting my butterfly hook. Once I have my butterfly hook in, pulling my knees to my chest, and kicking away to make space. And then I have that opportunity to get back to a mid-range open guard again. So we're here, he's got pressure, scooting my hips out to make space, butterfly hook goes in, and then when I pull my knees to my chest, this off balances enough for me to push and scoot my hips back and get all my limbs back in. That makes sense? All right, let's give it a shot. Even if I get my butterfly hook in, here, if I can't off balance his hips and make his hips float, then it's gonna be very difficult for me to kick him away. So let's say your hips are very stable, and then you drive your shoulder pressure into my neck, sassy hips out to the side a little bit, there you go. Here, if I try to kick him away, nothing really happens. I have to get that floating to move him away from me. So you feel how as soon as I pull a little bit, Kurt, that's when your hips are floating. So this is when the abs start to jiggle. That makes sense? So it's always that floating hip feeling that you're looking for the top person. And once the hips are floating, then you can move the person and scoot. Make sense? Cool. Yep.
How do you maintain that like chopstick pressure once you get your hook in? Like,
so once the hook is in, so we're here, and I do this here. So this bottom hook is pulling in like this.
Okay.
So you see how my hook here is pressuring up. And then if I can, I'm also trying to basically think about making as much human contact as possible with your partner. Mm-hmm. So for example, if your thigh is out, there's less ability for you to move your partner. If I can connect in a whole bunch of different positions, that gives me more of my body to off balance him with, and it's harder for him to step out if I connect and pinch my knees.
so you're focusing more on like your lower legs maintaining that pressure than like your thighs at that point?
Yeah, so it's as much of my legs as possible, connecting to my partner's legs and hips.
Okay.
So if I'm here and this is loose, he can step out. So I'm holding on tight.
Okay.
That makes sense?
Yeah.
Cool. Let's give it a shot. During this process, if you see an opportunity for an underhook, would you go for it? And this is where, like, part of why we always harp so much on having a game plan. And a game plan doesn't mean like a super specific plan for every single moment of every match, but it's a general rough outline of where you want to be headed during a match. And for me, my own personal game is very underhook, half guard heavy, right? Because I feel very comfortable from there. I have a lot of the problems worked out. I feel very strong in that position. But because we're working towards daily lever guard, and that's more of a mid or a long range guard, the guard recovery that we're doing now is more geared towards that. So most of the stuff that we're doing isn't geared towards getting yourself close to the person. It's geared towards maintaining mid or long range with the person. So making distance instead of closing distance. So it's the opposite of the half guard that we played a couple months ago. And that's why, for example, if Kurt's cut passing, like last week, so he drives me over for a cut pass. Last week we were here, or 2 weeks ago, here coasting and getting this leg back in instead of kicking through for an underhook. It's the difference between trying to make distance and maintain mid-range and trying to close distance and get the short range. That makes sense? So the reason I'm pointing this out is because these are just tools that help you get to specific positions that you should feel like comfortable in. So for me, I'm very comfortable in close range half guard. So the tools that I use for my guard maintenance and recovery are different than if I was playing a mid or a long range guard. Make sense? That's more about coasting, making distance, getting your feet back in, and trying to have as much of your whole body in between yourself and your partner as possible. That's what we're working on right now. So what we're gonna do is, if Kurt's on his back, we're gonna do some positional sparring. We're gonna start, person on top has, actually person on bottom, you can frame here if you want. Person on top has palm to palm grip, sassy hips out to the side, and all I'm looking for here is to try to slide this knee to the floor in the mount position. What Kurt's trying to do is trying to get from this position back to a seated position, meaning where he's sitting up and he's got his legs in between us. And that's all he's trying to do. That's the whole game right here. I'm trying to slide this knee to the mount position, and he is trying to get from this position to a sitting up position with both legs in between us. Make sense? Mm-hmm. Cool. Let's give it a shot.